Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men Podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about our mental health. And we're actually going full loco today. And the reason I'm saying that is because I have the hosts of the Going Loco Podcast with me. Got Georgia and Amanda. How are you going, Georgia and Amanda?
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Yes, very excited to be on your podcast.
Oh, thanks for coming on. And we literally just finished recording me as a guest on your podcast. And I had an absolute ball. So I thought, let's get you guys on here. Can I call you guys? Like, I want to ask, guys in Australia, we say guys.
Yeah.
And I'm always mindful about calling women guys. How do you guys go with that? Being cool guys.
Not a problem. I feel like the term is not. Yeah, it's a catch-all. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because we are going to throw a bit of PC out the window in this episode.
100%.
I have been doing this for a while now. Anyone who knows the Mindful Men Podcast, we're in our 140s, 30s, whatever it is. And I've always had a little bit of a PC hat on, just because I don't want to offend anybody in this space. But I also talk about comedy and humour is a great way to manage our mental health. So this is a big trigger. I know you guys love your trigger warnings as well. We are going to be talking about mental health, but we're going to throw the PC out. So we're going to go loco with it, and we're going to go dark, but we're also going to come up as well. So bear with us. If you don't like that when you talk about your mental health, this might not be the episode for you. So with that out the way, Georgia, I'm going to introduce you first. You're a trained opera singer, and I'd love to hear a few notes if you can, but don't feel obliged.
Yes, do Georgia. Oh, damn.
We'll see how we go, maybe at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
You're a boy mum as well, so I can understand your pain. I come from a family of 4 boys plus dad, so 5, my poor mum. And you're a stand-up comedian as well. So if not a song, maybe a few jokes at the end would be really cool. And Amanda, you're an author.
Yep.
You're a twin. You're a twinning it. And you're a Collingwood supporter. So
one-eyed. Carnivized. 2023 premiership. I forgot.
I'm still trying to get over 3 weeks ago when my team at the Adelaide Crows lost to you guys, and we also lost our best player in the last 10 seconds of the match. He was not running too far. Like, seriously. Anyway, that's another episode in itself. But you guys are from the Going Loco podcast. But before we get started, I feel like we should just lay it on the table, place our cards on the table. What's our labels? And I'm going to start just to warm you up. So OCD, depression, anxiety. Burnout happened for me. I don't want to say alcoholism. I don't ever feel like I was an addict, but alcohol misuse is probably where I sit with that. Over to you, Georgia. What's your cards?
Oh, my cards. So bipolar 1 with psychotic features.
All the good stuff.
Spicy.
It's spicy.
And Amanda, what about you?
I'm boring. I've just got depression. I don't have any of the good shit.
Oh, you're just down.
Just down. Yeah, depression's boring. Georgia gets to go up, man.
I know when you were talking about both you guys that had episodes during COVID, I'm like, COVID was too boring for me. It's when there's like lots going on that I really kind of
spark up. Yeah. Do stupid things, start a podcast.
Yeah. It was just too boring. I was like, it just didn't trigger me.
Yeah.
George, I'm going to ask though, because like I've talked about depression quite a lot. And it has had a bit of a spotlight, but I think we've had, from memory, bipolar on the show as a specific condition. So can you help us understand just a little bit what bipolar 1 is? Why is there a 1 afterwards?
Yeah.
What's the psychotic component of that as well? I'd love to hear that.
So, there's 3 types of bipolar actually. So there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and I think it's cyclothymia, they call it. So bipolar is characterized by up moods and down moods. And bipolar 1, you get the really high highs. So they call it mania. So if you've got bipolar 2, you'll have the depression but hypermania, which is a bit kind of lower form of the app, so you don't get as full on. But I've got the most full on version. And look, basically it's
greedy, Georgia, greedy.
Just greedy. It's characterized, well, for me, it's very seasonal based, and that is common across the disorder for people. So springtime is when the high mood kicks in. So it's really interesting there that the the sun's starting to come out, the animals, the buds popping seems to just set me.
Yeah. And Georgia.
It's really
yeah. I'm here, guys. I'm here.
Rebirth.
Yeah.
Yes, it's quite crazy actually how it is so linked to the seasons. But yeah, it's cyclical. So basically I'll have long periods of like normal or baseline mood, but then springtime or stress will set it off. And basically it's a funny one, you just start feeling like the best you've ever felt. Like best you've ever felt, like just really good. You start having a lot of ideas, you get a bit creative, like your mind's just constantly going and you're having a lot of new ideas and everything's a great idea, and you start kind of working on a project like a podcast and it gets very goal directed and
you can't fail and stuff. And
you're just like, so it's going to be
it's amazing.
Yeah, you know what it's like because you're like, oh yeah, I can see that you're mad.
Oh yeah, I could see. Yeah, I see Georgia's mania, and I love it because she'll come in and I can tell where she's at in her mania for how way out the ideas are. She's like, let's do this. I was like, all right, good idea, but maybe we'll think about that in 3 weeks' time when you're on the way down. And if you still want to do it after you come down and after that, then yeah, that's good. But it's great because it's because I've learned about bipolar doing this podcast with Georgia, because I think a lot of the time people are like, oh, that person's bipolar, they're like moody. And I'm like, no, nah, that's not what it looks like. Like it's a really like almost like a slow escalation. So I can see Georgia on the way up and then on the way down. Super interesting because there's a dissociative period before the depression. Do you want to describe that?
Yeah,
that's scary.
Yeah, talking about psychotic. So, I'm very aware of when the mania is happening and I just basically have to take more antipsychotics to kind of manage it. So I'm the first one to know. I'm like, yeah, I am. So I need to start, upping my meds. And, basically in terms of the psychotic features, so with bipolar 1, people with bipolar 1 can go so high that they tip into believing they're Jesus or tip into thinking they're famous, or it can just rise and rise and rise. And
you're famous to me, Georgia.
Yeah, It can tip into, and I've kind of had the very edge of this where your thoughts, you can start hallucinating when you've got bipolar 1. So you can start hearing voices and hearing, I do have the capacity to go into the psychosis, but I've really only tipped the very edge of it due to managing it with medication. But basically your thoughts become immersive and they're going so fast that, like, say I'd be imagining talking to you, right? And I would kind of, it's almost like a daydream. You'd be like, oh, I can see Amanda right in front of me and I'm talking to her, and then I'll flick out and go, oh, no, that's just my brain thinking about talking to her. And you can it sort of start to flick. That's why I feel like I've been on the very edge and managed not to kind of go the full whole hog, but I've got the capacity to. But so in terms of the disassociation, basically, so you have a big up, and it's actually super bad for your brain to get manic. It's basically a bit like bit of brain damage. And so I think your mind, to kind of cope, so you feel super connected, you're having all these fast thoughts, it's going really quick and it's all like connected and everything's connected, and then it's like your brain just goes and it can't cope, and like all your thoughts and everything just kind of, it's like they just go out into space, and then you can't even string two thoughts together. It's like, and you feel like far away from yourself. It's like you're sitting above yourself. You're like, feels like you're physically like disassociated from yourself, and that'll hang around for like a couple of weeks, and it's like a ringing in your ears, like, so you're just getting up every morning going, fuck, is this still here? Like, when is this leaving? And then you'll go down into a bit of a depression and, just feel shit for like maybe a week or two, and then you'll go back to normal.
Amanda, like watching this from your friend going through this, How does that make you feel? You know, like watching her go through the cycle, you know that when the mania is coming down and going into that depressive state. And from your perspective, I'd love to hear how that makes you feel.
I feel like Georgia has a really, like with depression, I don't know if you can relate to this, Simon, but I always think, I can just fix it. If I just do A, B, C, and D, I can fix it. Like I can be a better person, which is not true. Like it's a chronic illness. And I'll be on and off meds for life, I reckon. But then when I look at George's attitude towards it, she's just like, it's non-negotiable. I have this mental health condition. I have to take meds. It's not optional. It's quite a different perspective because George, like, I'm like, oh, let's look at some woo-woo stuff, some self-help. George is like, don't need self-help, don't need anything. Just take my meds, end of story. Yeah, look, the mania looks like heaps of fun.
Actually, I failed to add one part of it that it's actually not 100% fun. So it's actually also you have quite a lot of anxiety. So think about you just add an elevation. So along with like all the good feelings is like huge levels of anxiety. Like, so, you know, sometimes just to like step in a room is like hard because you're so like, it's like along with those good feelings is, like terror as well. So it's not all,
not all fun.
A lot of it is fun.
But it looks fun. It looks fun.
It looks, because also in terms of creativity, I can see that George is having loads of ideas and they're really fun. And because we've got the same sense of humour, you know, I know I'm encouraging it. The worst thing about Georgia and I is I was like, that's a great idea. Let's do that. But also I think because good ideas, they do have like a lot of energy. And when you're manic, you know, when George is manic, then her ideas have a lot of energy. She's creating a lot of energy and I'm just like a little gremlin feeding on that.
Yeah.
Love it. But it is super hard to watch the disassociation and the depression because like when you're flat, you know, like you can see the tumbleweeds.
Yeah, we've had weeks and it's gone both ways, I think. Like as long as one of us is like, okay.
He's having a good week.
If one of us is down and you go, fuck, it's super hard when you can see that the other person is just like, just and like nothing. Like,
yeah. And we're kind of dragging each other through it.
Dragging the other one through
it. But also I think it's hard because like, and I guess this is about your attitude towards your mental health as well, is that because I think I can fix it and it's just a fault, which is part of depression, a fault of my own that I'm not trying hard enough. Like we've talked, you know, in our podcast about how Georgia is like sometimes having bipolar will make me live a smaller life because like there's things you can't do. And I just feel like that's so fucking unfair.
Yeah, it's kind of like the weather, like in terms of the bipolar, like it just comes, it is, you know what I mean? I just have to kind of weather it when it comes along with medication and just kind of, it just kind of is and just kind of deal with it. But yeah, it does suck. And even like, you know, I have to take the medications, like that's a non-negotiable, but they have some really fucked up consequences for your health. So that's, I mean, we were just chatting last night, weren't we, about like that side of things. And it's like, yeah, there's no choice really. Like the choice is to be incredibly unwell. So it's kind of like your body or your mind, you know. So
maybe I'm a bit delusional because I think I have a choice because I have been on and off meds. Whereas, that seems maybe scary to me that you can't, like that's not a choice ever.
Well, I guess it is a choice because like we could make that conscious decision to not take the meds.
Yeah.
It's also that conscious awareness of knowing what would happen without the meds as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
So Amanda, I'm interested from your perspective, like we brushed you off. We didn't mean to.
Yeah, because depression.
It was depression. But yeah, I'd love to hear how you experience depression because we all experience mental health in different ways. And without meaning to brush you off and put you second, how does depression show up in your life? How does that involve you? Where did it start? Tell us your origin story with mental health.
So I've always felt like something was wrong with me, I guess, since I was like probably a teenager. I just felt like everybody else was coping with things and like I just didn't know how. Maybe they were all just lying. I feel like that's probably more accurate now. And I'm glad I grew up in the 90s when there was less social media because I like that lie would feel bigger. So I kind of sought help from 16 and then, you know, I had a psych and then I didn't. And I didn't really connect with psychs when I was younger. Like they weren't a great fit. So yeah, but I didn't actually get diagnosed with depression until I was like in my 30s, like early 30s. I also had some pretty huge, you know, I had a partner from 28 to 32 who passed away after complications during a heart transplant. And so I had engaged in therapy kind of before that because he had a chronic illness and was just kind of coping with that. And then obviously I was pretty loco after he passed away. But my diagnosis, a proper diagnosis didn't happen till like a little bit after that. Yeah, which was kind of interesting. But
so you'd been seeing someone from 15 or so?
I think 17 was the first time I
17.
Yeah.
And then you didn't get a diagnosis. Was that for some other issues that you were seeing?
No, I just was like, something's wrong and I'm not coping with, like, I just want to talk to someone. Like, I did have a friend, like my best primary school friend has clinical depression as well. So she, like, I guess the conversation was already kind of happening around me. Like, I never thought it was taboo to go and see someone or anything like that, but not getting that, until I did a mental health plan. And and I guess my attitude, so it shows up for my life is feeling disconnected, addictive behaviours, just never feeling good enough, kind of low self-esteem. And I've had periods of suicidality, is that the word? Mm-hmm. Which I don't know if you, Simon, if you relate to this at all, because when George and I talk about suicidality, like I sometimes find the thoughts comforting. Like that's how they show up for me. Like I'm just so overwhelmed with how shit I am at life that it's I've had periods of my life where I've made a plan, but then I'm like, because I am talking about mental health a lot, and I have people like all my close friends and family know, and obviously we've got a podcast now, so not even my close family and friends know. Like I have space to like talk about it, and I had to I've used the Beyond Blue Up where to make a plan and how do I avoid making a plan.
It's a really interesting question around seeking comfort in it. I hear a lot, and my wife often says this as well, is like suicide is like it's the ultimate selfish act. Right?
Disagree.
And from my perspective, as someone who's experienced suicide ideation or suicidality or however you want to express it, I think when I first experienced it was around 13, 14, and we're talking on your show about when my OCD really ramped up when mum and dad separated and all that type of stuff. And through that period until, say, my early 20s, when it would come up quite frequently, it felt, I wouldn't say comforting, but it felt like an answer to what was going on. So it felt like having an answer, and I never had a plan or anything like that, so I didn't get much further than the thought itself. It was just a way of finding some sort of control.
Yes. I absolutely relate to that.
And then now as a therapist, though, like I see it as like in the clients that I work with, when they're talking about this type of stuff, I'm not seeing it as a selfish act or weakness. I'm seeing this as their last little bit of control or problem solving. And so my job now as a therapist is to come up with alternative ways to problem solve.
Yeah, go on.
More healthy ways to do it. But I think it's a really prickly subject. To quote my social work supervisor, Gabby, who's been on the show, and we talked about take out your pineapples. So I recommend anybody who's interested in the suicide discussion to check out that episode. Suicide is a prickly discussion to have, and it's a difficult one because we just want our loved ones to be here forever.
100%.
And so when we talk about suicide, that's the removal of a loved one. But, there's no right and wrong in this space. It's all mental health. This is what we're here to talk about. And so, Georgia, I'm interested from your perspective, when you see Amanda in her low, and you talked a bit about before, when one's up, the other one's down, how does that feel for you to watch Amanda go through that? And also, sorry to hear about your partner as well. Go through that, like, Georgia, from your perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts on when Amanda's low and what you try to do to bring her up, if anything.
It's hard because I can relate to it so deeply. I'm like, oh, like it hurts to see.
Yeah, to watch it.
Fuck, I know exactly what that feels like. So it's hard to see. And then hard, I think, in yourself too, because you're like, when you're not in it, it is hard to, I'm not using my words right, but like it's hard to see. It's hard to see because I know what it feels like. And I think, I don't know, I think I do try and kind of, when we catch up, I feel like we do, like even if I'm down, I'll get a boost from it where I'm like,
100%.
Had some connection, had some I don't know if it's like the same for you.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, like I'll literally be like, I'm going to podcast today. And then Georgia will turn up and I'm like, oh, I remember about laughing. That's great. And also it's a space to have a conversation. Just be like, no, I'm super fucking flat. Like,
yeah.
you know.
And it has been interesting, I think, to learn, we've been doing this nearly a year and I've thought, fuck, we've had a lot of moods. Like,
yeah.
a lot of downs, there's been some ups. Like, it's been quite interesting to reflect on how, I think because I probably tell myself, oh, it's not that frequent. And then as I've looked back over the year, I'm like, yeah, there's been a lot.
And I've gone like back on meds since we started, and talked about how defeated I felt about having to go back on meds, and yeah. Probably wanted to mention as well that my youngest brother, has very bad depression, very significant depression, and he has had psychotic episodes and he's been hospitalized for them. So our family and his friends and everyone are like well versed at having that suicide conversation, being like, are you suicidal? Have you got a plan? And then there's nowhere to go after that. Like, you kind of, not nowhere to go, but it's just like, would you like me to call the CAT team? Are we ready yet? Are we there? Mm-hmm. So in terms of like having suicidal thoughts, I have no qualms with being like, I'm feeling suicidal to these people so that they're aware of what's going on, which is, I think, a very privileged position to be in, because obviously you're talking about men's health, and I feel like my brother is like a rare unit, although it's been forced upon him because he's had psychotic episodes and been hospitalised for that. But it's a very privileged position that he's in, that he's got really tight mates that he's allowed to speak about his mental health with, and then that's opened up, because of his problems, has opened up our family to be able to have a discussion about it.
Yeah. And we talked about plans before around suicide, but also plans for well-being. And you mentioned calling the CAT team. So when we talk about our mental health and we engage with our mental health, even though we struggle with it, it opens up the door to help.
It does.
Whether it's a friend, family member, mental health professional, the CAT team, which is, from memory, it's like an acute mental health crisis team.
Yeah, I think they've changed their acronym now. But
it's all over the place, acronyms. So it's a number that you call and there's somebody on the other end who, I guess, kind of like Beyond Blue and Lifeline, those kind of things, they act in a similar way, where it's a crisis support line, get connected in with the local service provider as well. And so it opens up the door for an amazing conversation, or not necessarily amazing, but a healing conversation, which is another plan.
Yeah, something that you said is interesting around the suicide stuff. So in my family, my sister actually committed suicide and has passed away. And I think that's had the opposite effect, where I was like, I know that I've had someone in my family do it and the consequences of it. So it's actually had more of a silencing effect, because I was like, how can I talk about it when I know intimately know the devastation that it causes? So it's almost that had a silence, because you're way more open about, like, your family and stuff is way more open about talking about it and stuff than my family or I am.
They're stressful conversations though, because
it's still not easy.
I can have them, but it's still not, because sometimes the answer is yes.
Yeah,
I am, and then. Yeah, and you go to like, okay, are we calling the CAT team, or, basically like you're on suicide watch now, and then it's calling the rest of the family and being like, all right, we're gathering around. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
I always picture mental health like a roller coaster ride. Like, there's days when we're up. It's probably like a bipolar roller coaster ride. We're up and we're feeling like we're on the top of the world. Next minute we're down. We're face plummeting to earth. Vomits all over us. We feel like this is the end, and things level out a bit. Then we're upside down all over the place. And eventually we get off and we're like, fuck, that was all right.
Yeah. Wow, did that again? Bloody hell.
Take a photo along the way, So like, and it's a great discussion. Like, and for some people it's really hard. Some people it's really easy. I love how you guys, through the podcast, so the Going Loco podcast, bring it in and talk about it in all its warts and all, but also bring in the humour as well. And this is what we're trying to do with this episode. Hopefully some people are finding it funny. I am. And so why is humour so important in these discussions as well? Why is it important for us to not take it so seriously all the time? Sometimes we do, yes, but other times we can laugh at ourselves. Why is that important for you guys?
I think it opens up the conversation, doesn't it? Like, it's allowing, talking about mental health, it can be stigmatizing. You can not want to talk about it. So to use humour, it's kind of a way of opening it up and like saying, come on down.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't be stupid. We all have those thoughts. Like, we were talking before about OCD and everyone has intrusive thoughts. And I was like, you think you're alone. You're just like, oh. But to actually like say, oh, no, that's happening to me as well.
Yeah.
And laughing about it, because they're dickhead thoughts. Like, you're like, what? This is a stupid thought, but.
And I think to move away from like the sincerity and the somberness, because I find that like a bit constricting, or it just doesn't really resonate with me to talk about it in that way, because there's always, it's just always
it's a fucking head tilt. It's like
it's a depressing thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when we can add the humour in, and Georgia, you're a comedian, you're a stand-up comedian.
Trying to be.
Like, do you put yourself on stage and talk about mental health, or is that part of your niche? Is that part of your topics? Like, where do you go with it?
Well, yeah, and I'd like to add that I'm probably an emerging.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, you're full blown now. You're full blown.
Go start somewhere, man. Go start somewhere.
But yeah, a lot of it does centre on mental health. Like recently did a piece for The Moth, the storytelling podcast The Moth, and actually won, which was awesome. But I spoke about my experience. So as we touched on at the start, I've got 3 boys, and with each birth I actually had postnatal psychosis and postnatal mania and had to spend some time in a mother-baby unit. So I did turn that into a bit of comedy gold.
It was bloody great.
Yeah, I have had some really fucked up experiences, and it was like incredibly frustrating, because with bipolar it's very well known that when you give birth, like, you are going to have an episode. And even just managing, like, taking medication through pregnancy, and it's actually like quite a lot to manage. And I found it just, there wasn't that much information out there. And then, I'd gone in with a plan, like I'd given birth in a private hospital.
Other people's plans, like, I want a water birth. George is like, I need epic amounts of Seroquel.
Sedate the fuck out of me. That's what was like, I'm going to give birth and then you can wheel me over to the psych ward and sedate me. But unfortunately, even though the wards were fucking next to each other and I'd gone in with a plan, it didn't go like that at all.
We got lost. You're in the car park, wheeling around.
Epic fail. Like, it was so frustrating, because I thought, what happens to women that don't know this is coming for them? This is what happened to me when I had a really, good plan. And so I think going through those experiences, like, I don't know, there's a lot of fodder.
You do have a good sense of humour about it for something that
was
spending time
traumatized.
Yeah, epically traumatizing, spending time in the psych ward.
As someone who's a mum, like, giving birth, I'm interested, like, because I look at my kids and I look at my history and go, fuck, I hope they don't end up like me. And we talk about this on your show, that, like, people often say that me and my son are very much the same person. And I'm like, no, like, don't do that to him. But I mean, I come from a different place compared to my dad. My dad never talked about mental health. Even to this day, even though I want to say out and proud about my mental health, like, he still doesn't engage in conversation with me about my mental health. Whereas I can do that with my son. I know what it's like to not have someone to talk to. I feel that. As a mum giving birth to a baby, you're on the meds, you know what's coming. Do you feel like, am I passing this on to my kids?
Yeah, I do worry. I mean, I feel like I'm a bit hyper vigilant, like kind of looking at them being like, what's that?
Are you breathing?
Or just like, oh, that's a bit mental, isn't it? Or like just being kind of like, oh, say that again.
Like, crazy, not crazy, not crazy.
And we've got the added thing we've just found out in our household, that probably the majority of our household is neurodiverse, including myself. There's a bit of inattentive ADHD floating around the place. I've got that thrown in as well.
Pile it on.
So I'm like, feeling probably super guilty that I'm passing on not only the bloody neurodiversity, but the bloody mental health condition as well. But
so many gifts to give.
I think I'm just aware of it. I'm just aware of, I think, like we were discussing before, I really label what's going on. So if I'm feeling down, I'm like, guys, I'm feeling down. Like, chatting to the kids and going, this is why, I'm feeling like this, and this, just to normalise the conversation around it. And then if I'm having, a bit of a a manic or a hypomanic episode. Just, I mean, it's obviously blatantly obvious. I had an experience where my older son was like looking at me like that, and I thought, fucking hell, because I remember because my mum and sister actually had bipolar as well. So I remember looking at my mum like that, going, what the fuck? Like, and we had no words around it. Like, we didn't have words around it. I was just like, oh, this is, mum's bit up at the moment or whatever, but we had no idea what was going on. But I just said,
mum's doing that thing again.
She does, but she stays up for 4 nights in a row and is like cooking heaps of food, and she's like talking and her eyes are like in another place. Yeah, she's doing that thing again. But I just said to Mark, I said, are you looking at me because I seem like a different person? He said, yeah, you do. And I said, I'm a bit manic, and I know that I do come across, like my husband says, it seems like it's like you're acting as yourself, like this kind of, it's you, but you're like putting on a bit more of you, but like
you're just doing your showgirl version of yourself. I love it. Sorry, I shouldn't encourage it because, the consequences of it.
But it's crazy because the amount of confidence you have when you're manic, you do feel like, and you're just chatting, everything. Yeah, but anyway, so I just labelled it with him, and he's like, yeah, that's it. And I said, okay, I'm manic. Like, and it does feel good to be able to label it with him, and then, hopefully if one of them or all of them do have issues, that they have words to use around it, because that's what I found I didn't have. I didn't have the words. What was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda, your family's quite open with it.
Yes.
As well, and has been for quite a while. And you're a twin.
I am.
I'm interested, like, comparing yourself to your twin, brother or sister. Is it brother or sister?
I've got 3 brothers and a twin sister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So your sister.
Yeah.
Are you two similar? Are you complete opposites? Like, how does that play out in your family as well?
Yeah, we're so my sister and I are like super, super tight and always have been, which is lovely. Are you basically asking if she's got depression as well?
I basically am asking that.
Yes. Only recently has life got her down, which I find interesting. She's has always been very, very resilient, and things work out quite well for her a lot of the time. Like, I think, which I don't know if that is a chicken or egg thing. We share a sense of humour as well. Like, we think the same things are funny. So, and this is probably going to sound a bit sick, but like when we were going, my brother was having a psychotic episode. He was like fucking so psychotic, and he's in the psych ward, and one of his paranoias was that the nurses are cops, right? So like that just becomes a running joke in our family. Like, we're like sure to be like, when he's well again and someone references that he was in the psych ward, like, this might sound a bit mean, but we're like, oh, the nurses are cops. Like, just tease him about it. And he's like, shut up, like, blah, blah, blah. Because otherwise, and this is, bringing it back to kind of humour coming in, like, that's the way our family deal with things. And how we are able to have a conversation about it is to make a joke out of it, and that's why our podcast is so un-PC as well, because that's, most people will be like, that is a really mean thing to say to your brother, but he's got a really good sense of humour as well. So, and if you don't laugh, it's kind of like you don't laugh, you cry. Like, what are the options is to not talk about it, be super sincere about it, or like, obviously it does get very serious at times, but generally speaking, that sense of humour keeps the conversation open, and it is a place, then it becomes a place where you can come and you're welcome, and you can kind of just come as you are, I think, instead of being like, if someone said to me, like I said, I've got depression to someone, and you get the head tilt, you're like, oh, that's hard. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. But like, if I'm able to break out of it, then I get to be vulnerable, but I'm not putting it on anyone else as well, I think, maybe.
I think it highlights like both resilience and hope. When you can put humour into it, that it enables you to kind of sit in that moment and not dwell on it. You are already dwelling on it when you're having a down period, but then to be able to laugh about it, to joke on it, lifts you up, but it also gives you hope that things will be okay. And if you can do that in an open family environment, that's even better. But you guys take it to the next level and go loco on a podcast. I'm going to assume that this started in spring.
Yes, would be right.
It did.
Tell me about where did the inspiration, I mean, probably know where the inspiration came from, it's just a moment in time.
A chemical imbalance.
But like, like what made you two go, let's do a podcast and go loco on a podcast about mental health, comedy, all the things. Some great episodes. I was listening to them before we jumped onto this call today. Where did the inspiration come from? Tell us the origin piece for the Going Loco podcast.
It was literally a manic episode.
Yeah.
I messaged Georgia about a particular. I listened to a podcast and it was about mental health, owning your disorder, and it was about identity basically. And I was like, oh, that's a really weird, like saying, oh, I'm schizophrenic instead of me, medicating myself or whatever. The rest of the world's just going to have to cope with me. And I was like, that's a bloody alarming, because it depends on what your behaviours are if you're psychotic. So I'd sent it to Georgia and we'd started a conversation and she happened to be manic. I was overseas at the time and she was like, let's start a podcast. And this is the thing about me. I think everything is a good idea. Like I'm like, yes.
And actually, it took us a while, didn't it? Like it took us a couple of months of us recording, and there was so much material that we didn't use because we were like finding our voice. Like it took a while to kind of from that manic kind of
nugget of an idea.
To be like, oh, okay, we want to talk about it like this. And
and we had vulnerability hangovers because we were just like spewing a lot of
just our stories like straight. I remember at one point saying, I think I was talking about my third birthday because my youngest son's only 2, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry this isn't funny yet. Like it's still traumatic. Like I'm sorry that I haven't worked this into a joke yet. Like I'm really sorry.
Yeah. And I like told my story. We recorded me telling my story, and I literally the next day was texting Georgia like, do you still like me? Like I feel like you don't like me anymore. Because I was like feeling so vulnerable about all the information I'd shared. So then we decided to just do it topic based and reveal our stories kind of bit by bit. Because that sitting in it is hard.
It is. And to share it so many times, like not only do I host, but I'm a guest on lots of podcasts as well. And sometimes you're like, oh, I'm telling the same story again and again and again. I think this comes out to that identity piece. I do a lot of work in the mental health and the disability space, and there's a lot of, I guess, tension in how much do you own the label, live with the label, as opposed to just, it's part of you, it's not who you are. And I go between the two. Like, I think knowledge is power. And so when we own my label, I'm OCD, right? If I own it, it gives me more control. We talked about control and guess engagement in what's going on. But sometimes, I guess this is the down part for me, is fuck, I've got to share this story again and again and again. And I guess that's the nature of a podcaster, is that we do that often. So how do you balance that? Like the topics based on your own story, how do you keep going? Because podcasting is a tough thing to show up every week and keep recording. How do you go?
George is really good at promoting it. Like people like, you got a podcast. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I've got a podcast about mental health, and I just won't tell them what it's about because I don't want to be vulnerable. Yeah, George is like, can you start promoting the podcast more? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want people to know. So then Georgia gets manic and does all the promotion. Yeah, what? It's taken me the whole year of us podcasting to come to terms with the label, because I have got a diagnosis and I do take meds for it, and it does occur for me all the time, but it's really...
But I did have to drag you kicking and screaming, didn't I? Like when we were ready, like it took when we were just about ready to launch and you're in Bali and I'm like, all right, green light, we're ready to go, and I just couldn't get onto you for a couple of days. I
got my phone, ran away. I was like, nope, not happening. Yeah.
Which I can, like...
I was just missing in action.
Yeah. You're like...
No, this can't happen. I'm vulnerable. It's awful. But now it's just, it is a thing now. Yeah.
There's times too when if I'm feeling a bit down, or I'll be like, oh, I do get down about it, and then you've got to carry it a little bit. So it's kind of like goes back and forth a bit, because it is, I think I didn't realise in my initial idea that all the work that goes into it and what it looks like, and it's a lot of work, as you would know, and it is hard showing up to record when you might have other things going on. You might be feeling like shit. You might be just not feeling inspired, or like...
Or you've only got out of bed 10 minutes before Georgia got there.
I think maybe that's where we're lucky that there's two of us, so we can balance it a bit, whereas I imagine, Simon, it's probably harder for you because it is you that has to be the constant kind of driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And this morning, I start recording as early as 6 a.m. And so we're staying in a resort at the moment on the day that we're recording, and I've got to kick my wife out of bed. So off you go, about to record with someone on across the other side of the world. And I mean, she's okay with it because we've got young kids and they're up early anyway, but it starts early. And it's interesting. I think on the day we're recording, I think we're 100 and something, 30 roughly episodes so of the Mindful Men podcast. And I've got more in the bank. So I've actually recorded more than that. I get this huge sense of anxiety when I'm about to turn on. I didn't have it with you guys, I think, because we've already met and we had a good chat last time, and I really love what you're doing with your show. Most times I have this huge, overwhelming sense of anxiety, like, is this going to be good enough? And I'll be in conversation with people, having a chat, and my brain, with the mental health brain, goes off on a tangent going, is this going to get likes? Is this going to get views? Is someone going to look at this poorly? You know, is this being too PC or not enough PC, and all this type of stuff that goes through my mind as a podcaster and as someone who engages in mental health conversations. But I think what that highlights is that we're just all human, and this is a normal thing. And the more we talk about it, and I always say the more I talk about it, the easier it gets. So now I can come into shows not as prepared as I was on episode 1.
Yeah.
It was a 20-minute or 15-minute episode, which took me about 4 hours to record because I kept stopping and starting. And I didn't realize you could do this thing called editing. So I didn't have to stop and start and re-record, all that stuff. But it's also a passion. It's a passion that brings a lot of energy, or requires a lot of energy, to keep showing up and talking. And that's, I guess, where I like on this show particularly, that I can bring a diverse range of topics to mindfulness as well. It's not just about meditation and bubble baths and mental health. It's about anything. I could do a whole episode on footy, which I probably should do. And Amanda, we'll have to get on and have a chat about Collingwood and Adelaide.
Yes.
But we can take it in diverse spaces. So I'm interested from your perspective, like from the Going Loco podcast, from each of you, and Georgia, I'll start with you. What's been a highlight of your show so far that has really resonated with you, stuck with you, whether it's something that Amanda said or something that you've had insight for yourself, or a guest or something like that?
I think I just like how far we've come in terms of the vibe and the comedic vibe. Like, I really love what we've been able to achieve in terms of it being funny. Like, that's for me, more than the mental health side. I'm like, oh, that really funny joke or that really funny conversation that we were able to have. I think where we started and where we've got to in terms of being able to bring the funny has been probably the highlight for me. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah,
love that. Good one.
How about you, Amanda? What's the standout thing for you, given your journey into the podcasting space, and you've been doing it for a while now? Like, what stood out for you?
Turning up, having to turn up, because in a creative pursuit has been really like just pretty game-changing for me, because I do have, like, especially with writing and stuff, like just 1,000,001 incompleted projects, which has lots of effects on my mental health. You know, you want to spiral, I'll show you my to finish pile, and that's 1,000,000 spirals in paper form. So actually showing up every week and doing it together and committing to something and has been a real highlight. And also like that to drag myself through flatness, any kind of depression flatness, has been really nice. Thanks, George.
When you press record or you finish pressing record, you do all the editing and you press publish, what does that feel like for you on an episode?
Oh, initially it felt fucking terrifying, like absolutely terrifying, because it was kind of like, I mean, a lot of people knew about my mental health, but a lot of people didn't. So it was like, fuck, everyone at work's going to know about this. Everyone's going to know. Yeah, so it was quite scary, but it's got easier.
I'm still shit.
Yeah.
No, I don't listen. I have to listen to it like a couple of weeks once it's published. And I always am fearful that it's going to be shit. And I'm always surprised when I like laugh at it, or I'm like, oh, yeah, that's quite cool. But then I've also had blowback. I interviewed my brother that had psychosis, and my older brother's probably not as understanding about mental health, and he hated the episode, and I got a lot of blowback from him. He was like, you need to take it down. You need to put more trigger warnings on it. Yeah, that was a bit of a spiral. Yeah. So yeah, there's like fear around it as well. I love a good bit of fear.
Do you find a sense of accomplishment though? Like you said, you've got a to-do list that's so long.
Oh yeah.
Like I feel whenever I press record, as much as it's an emotional roller coaster to get through one episode, and I'm lucky these days I don't have to do the editing like I used to. Now I outsource the editing, but like the publishing part, once I've done that, I'm like, I've done it. Like tick. I'm still ticking off that every single week. And to look back and go, man, I've actually recorded like over 250 episodes, either as a host or a guest.
Yeah.
And that's a huge sense of achievement to keep showing up when your mental health is getting in the way as well.
Yeah, because it's so easy to just be like, I might just fade away now.
I suppose we've got the almost accountability of each other, don't we? Whereas like, oh, well, the other person's there.
Counting on me.
So I've got to be there. Yeah, which is not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely an accomplishment because
Yeah, I think maybe I know what our problem is because my husband, he does the final sound edit and hits publish, so neither of us.
Yeah, neither of us actually do it.
Oh, you outsource that part.
Yes.
So
We outsource the accomplishment. Fucking hell, I'll take that back, Georgia.
when I say to Stu, put it up there, it's like, yep, there is like, yeah, it's there. We got it there. Because it does feel like we're fortnightly, but to get it there, it is like
a process.
Like, oh, it's there. Okay, it's a relief actually for me. I'm like, fuck, okay, it's done. We did it. We managed to achieve it.
And now the next one.
And now
we're basically just lurching towards things like, the next one, what next?
It's even time like managing it around like, you know,
kids.
I've got a job, 3 kids. Like there's other shit going on.
Yeah, nothing. I just got a dog. I got a dog.
And a to-do list that goes forever as well.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, like, you know, obviously for people listening to this episode, they're kind of getting a glimpse of what to expect. But for anyone who's out there who's going, you know what, I might check them out, what would you say to them? I'll start with you, Amanda. And what can they expect from the Going Loco podcast to entice them to come over and listen to you two go at each other every fortnight?
I would say what you can expect is that you'll definitely get a laugh, that we will touch on something that's probably a little bit heavy, but then absolutely cuts through it with humour. Like it'll probably be like kind of a hard listen, but then it'll be, you know, like good comedy does, it kind of like you bring it to the edge and you're like, oh, did you just say that? And then you like cut it down. So it's like kind of that tension and release. That's what you can kind of expect from it, that you'll get a laugh, but then you'll like something will get serious but we'll go back to laughter because we're always kind of ending on a high note. What do you reckon, Georgia?
Absolutely. Paying that 100%. And I think, you know, if you are someone that's experienced a mental health condition, you can see yourself reflected maybe. And if you're someone who doesn't have any experience of mental health conditions, you'll probably learn something, but you'll have a big laugh as well along the way. So
yeah. I always learn something.
Yeah.
Every time we turn up.
Yeah.
Love it.
Georgia's really smart.
Oh.
Do we hear any opera singing?
Oh, yes. I'll get it out of her, Simon.
One day. I'm going to shoot it every time just to wait. I'm waiting for it. Even one note would be great. It is a great show and I love it. And it's part of my cycle now. So thanks so much for touching base with me to come on this show, but also have me on your show as well. We did have a chat earlier today.
Yeah, great. It was a great
on
show.
your show as well. Talking about all things OCD and men's mental health. On that, before I let you go, 2 more questions. Mental health. And you asked me this question. I thought it was a great question. So I'm going to ask it back to you.
Oh, shit.
I'm a guy. I experience mental health in a men's world, right? What is it like for you two as women to experience mental health? What are the things that come up for you in terms of coping, managing, sharing vulnerabilities? Like, what's the theme that comes up for you?
I think it's hard. I know I found it hard, like, as a woman who's also a mum. Like, one of the things that held me back from talking about what like my diagnosis and what I go through is thinking, oh, what if other people with kids don't want me to like look after their kids? So I think you have that. It's kind of a weird space to go, but like that's valid. Yeah, that stopped me talking about it with other mums because I was like, oh, you know, being a mum, you've got this kind of responsibility and I was like, what if people knowing that brings down people's thoughts about me? I don't know if you've had the same thing as a dad, Simon, where you're like, well, what if people don't? I don't know. Yeah. So I think that lens of being a mother and having to kind of keep it together for everyone as a mum too can be hard because you're like, you've kind of just got to keep going. You know, no matter how shit you feel, you've still got to have dinner on the table. You've got to get people to school. You've got to get the washing wash. You've got to.
I have no responsibility at all.
Like there's things you can't
drop the ball.
I find it hard because I can't drop the ball. I can drop it to a limited extent and my partner will pick it up for a little bit, but I feel like there's a time limit on that where he's like, come on. Like,
you're going to be manic for 2 weeks.
So I think, probably men feel that in a different way, but yeah, there's that pressure, I think, when you're a mum of like holding other people's like emotional space as well. Like you're creating the temperature, the emotional temperature for them at home. So you kind of feel like, fuck, that's a big responsibility to be kind of keeping it a calm, safe space, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah, regulating their emotions. So you've got to kind of keep a check of yourself. If you're like, fuck, I've got 3 people I've got to fucking regulate here. Like,
yeah, I had a more positive view on being mental as a woman.
Bring us up, Amanda, because that went down.
Because when I think about men's mental health, I think, the fucking so many men suffer in silence and I feel like they not always have a space to go to speak about that thing. And I feel like it's the opposite for women. I feel like it's more, we generally as a gender are more inclined to speak about what's going on for us and, you know, have that close connections with our friends and stuff like that. So I actually feel like our space, that it's easier to be a woman in the mental health space. But maybe I'm just positive. Being positive. I don't know. George is bringing us fucking down.
Sorry,
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. But Georgia, you do raise a very valid point that's happening in my household as well. So I'm the loco one in our household, like by far. But my wife's been struggling herself, and I'm hoping she's okay. I'm just about to tell the world about that. But she's been struggling, and she says we have similar discussions. Like she feels like she's got to hold up the house while Simon's loco, while the kids are going off their heads. And she's still got to soldier on as well. And so it is a very valid point, I think, happening in more households than we actually give credit to. And a lot of mums, similar to a guy, like don't feel that they can share because of worry about supporting other people, but also what other people might say, like the other parents at school drop-off
100%.
or at sport or something like that. But Amanda, and you're right as well, is like I think a lot of guys struggle to talk about this type of stuff because we don't see it as our space to talk about this stuff.
And it's harder to create that space.
Yeah, and my journey through, well, the way I designed Mindful Men as a therapy business is one where it's out and about, it's shorts and T-shirt, hat, it's very casualized, whereas historically I've been into clinics and they're all very sterile, feminine, nurturing, give me a cuddle, all that type of stuff. Here's this incense burning. Not a man space where if we can break that down and put it out in the park or at the beach or in a mechanics workshop or on the basketball court, wherever it is, where it's more guys are more likely to come to.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a barrier. It's about to take down those barriers to participation in it.
But yeah, both points, and I'm glad we brought it. So one last question, and I have a feeling that we could talk for 6 hours, and there would be your next 6 episodes. Maybe if that's what you need, we can do that one day. We can have a podcast marathon.
Yes.
But the last thing I'd like to leave us all on is to plug something that makes you feel good. So we do talk about some difficult stuff, and we've touched on a whole bunch of stuff today with humour. I love Going Loco. This is great. I'm going to do it more often. Is what's lighting you up at the moment? Something that you're reading or watching on TV, self-care activity. Is it your medication? Is it a conversation you had, a joke that you've got? Wink, wink, Georgia. What is lighting you? Amanda, we'll start with you. What's something that's lifting you up at the moment that maybe the audience can tune into and go, I might check that out for myself?
I'm reading a book called 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. And I kind of stumbled across it. It was like a suggestion. Does have a bit of a self-help bent, but it is changing the way I think about things. And it's kind of presented in a bit of a listicle form, but I'm listening to it on audiobook. And I just find her take on things like super interesting and like reframing things like she was talking about, like if you feel fear, this is one example, like if you feel fear, then that means you have buy-in. And so like move towards that. And yeah, just it's changing the way I think, like the title says.
You're actually getting what you paid for.
I
love
know.
that.
Who knew? So that's lighting me up at the moment. I'm a huge reader, if I'm reading something good, the world will know about it.
Awesome. What about you, Georgia?
So recently, mine is just an awareness of when things shift. So basically, they kept telling me, they're like, with bipolar, it can change. As a woman in your 40s, it can change. And I'm like, not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. And I recently had a period of depression that kind of lasted longer than it normally would for me, and it wouldn't go away. And I kind of hung on for a long time and didn't reach out to my psych, and then recently just reached out, and he's just thrown in another antipsychotic. So that's 2 antipsychotics. One wasn't enough.
Bloody collecting them, Georgia. Greedy, I tell you.
I felt better within like 4 days, and I was like, "You idiot, Georgia!" Like, I was just hanging on for about like 3 months of feeling like shit, and I'm like, I could have literally done this, weeks, months ago. And mine would be, if you feel like shit, go and get it sorted. Don't just
go and collect some more antipsychotics. Nom 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 nom.
That's my advice. Yeah. Don't let it fester.
I just imagine you just nomming on medication, like the Cookie Monster.
It's like a maraca,
Well, Amanda, Georgia, thanks so much for coming on the Mindful Men podcast, getting mindful about mental health, but from a humour perspective. Hopefully you enjoyed coming on. I've had an absolute ball. It's great to have you on. So again, thanks, and go the Crows this weekend.
Hey, go on the Maggies. Yay, thanks, Simon.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.